Screw this city. There's never been a worse time to rent an apartment in NYC. So the person who said this was Kelly Stamps. Oh my god. No, why does it have to be her? I actually like her videos. Like, let's see what happens.
Monday, I spent all day running around Manhattan looking at 350 square foot studios for the prices of $5,000 and up.
That's how much they cost, unfortunately. It's the most popular city in the world to live in. It's like everyone goes to New York. My best friend, he's a Dominican immigrant, and he lives in Philadelphia. But he told me the story about how his mom and dad used to work in New York before. I was like, oh, why'd you move? And he was like, dude, obviously if they could make it in New York, they'd stay there. We wouldn't move to Philly. And I was like, oh, doy. Like, no kidding, right? Like, everyone wants to go to New York. No one's aiming to like, oh, I want to make it big in Maryland. I want to make it big in Virginia or something like that. They're aiming for New York. Everyone's aiming for New York. And if you don't make it happen there, you go somewhere else. That's why the city's very expensive. Everyone wants to live here for some reason.
I have been here looking at various apartments for a boost to my creativity. I
guess New York does that. I feel like a lot of cities do that, but you know, if you want to live your villain arc in New York City or whatever, then like, sure.
cannot create any stories in the state of Texas. I should not be worrying about things like marriage right now. I ended up narrowing down my search to 3 different places. One was this really cute, luxurious
Central Park South, bro. You guys know about Robinhood? You guys know what Citadel Investments is? Ken Griffin lives in Central Park South, all right? This dude just bought a $238 million penthouse there because he's a multi-billionaire because he owns like Citadel Securities, which works with Robinhood a lot, and they like make a ton of money off people there. That's where you're trying to live? Of course it's gonna be expensive.
hamster cage at Central Park South in one of those fancy buildings. The other one
in a fancy building as well. Jeez.
Is somewhere in Upper East Side, like the
Upper East Side, another place where like old rich people live.
Proper Upper East Side, kind of
proper Upper East Side too.
Closer to the park, which is really hard to find.
When people say Fifth Avenue or like Park Avenue, they're talking about the Upper East Side Park and Fifth Avenue.
And then, oh yes, Upper Yorkville, like right on the cusp, right before it becomes East Harlem. I'm gonna first show you that one, so let's talk about it.
You decided to join at $750 per.
Oh my god, the pool costs $750 per year to access. Okay, that's a little ridiculous. That's I'm with her there.
Person for the year. Yeah.
Yes.
This is the most depressing rooftop I've ever seen.
That, and this is a view.
Apart from the
Very
view,
nice.
the view is obviously
Beautiful.
gorgeous.
Is that Astoria?
Yes.
But the major complaint was
The only thing is, this place had really long elevator wait times. Like
okay, so you find the perfect place, but then the elevator wait times are too long. She says it's like 6 minutes or something like that. I doubt it's like that every day. There's just no way the elevators are that bad, you know? But maybe that is the case. Another thing people complain about is like the discrimination for renters in the case of you need to make a certain amount of money to be able to rent from a certain place. And the reason why New York landlords are able to get away with that, keep in mind, New York landlords have like the worst laws written against them. It is very difficult to be a New York landlord because every law written for real estate is like in the favor of the renter. Like, just like keep that in mind, you know?
if you want to move into this place, it's called Normandy Park. They require 50 times the rent though, 50.
Is 50 times the rent that much money for New York City? You should only be living in New York City if you're able to make a lot of money. So let's say the rent is $2,000. It is not, but let's say it is. You need to make $100,000 a year. That's not that much in New York City. Let's say the rent is $4,000. That's going to be $200,000 salaries in New York City. If you're a software developer, if you're a lawyer, you're going to be making that much money. So for them, it's not that big of a deal.
50, not 40, 50 times the rent. How are these people affording this?
Because they're lawyers and investment bankers and that type of stuff.
I don't know. I do know. According to TikTok, people are forging their paperwork. They're doing all sorts of things on Photoshop to make the 50 times the rent requirement.
I guess you could do that too. That's something called illegal, but you can't like get someone for that because the legal fees cost more than what you'd get for like the reward for it.
They are 5 steps ahead now. I just applied for a different place, which is not in this video, and they made me connect my bank account through this third-party app. It then pulled up all the money in my savings account, business savings.
Well, the whole issue with her is that she's not really an employee anywhere, so she can't like guarantee her income, right? I actually talked to a few landlords about this because I know a couple, and they do this thing where you connect bank accounts, but like that's one way to prove income. I don't know why that's like that big of an issue. Like a lot of times, if you're renting to someone and it's almost impossible to kick them out because of New York City like renter friendly laws. Just fun fact, guys, if you want to abuse your New York City landlord, just stop paying rent and just don't say anything. Obviously, not legal advice, okay? But it's very difficult for the landlord to actually kick you out and get the money from you. Just fun fact there. So that's why they do ridiculous things like this, because the renters are ridiculous as well. The people who end up getting hurt the most are renters who actually pay their rent, because they essentially have to subsidize all these other bad renters.
Assets I have, which are pretty much none except for a good personality.
Come on, like you got 600,000 subscribers on YouTube. You've made money the past couple of years or however long you've been doing this. Like, trust me. If you haven't, like, get a new manager or something.
That's the level that they're on here. You pretty much need to be ready to buy a house to get a simple apartment here, which is ridiculous. So
I guess if you're a contractor, that might be a thing. The next counter argument for expensive New York rental prices is, oh, just like don't live in New York. Let's see what she has to say about that.
I understand the dynamic between living in New York City and being here versus, living elsewhere, like on the outskirts in Connecticut, whatever. I could get such a nice place if I went out to Connecticut, if I went upstate, if I went to even like Maplewood, New Jersey, anywhere.
You really could. And I think more people should do that. But the reason why she doesn't want to do that is, she says why. It's because New York is one of the greatest, if not the greatest cities in the world. And that means everyone wants to move there. And guess what? That means the demand for housing there goes up, which means prices go up. Who would have thought?
But the point of being here, whether you're creative or not, is to get that momentum going. You're not going to feel it if you go all the way out to Long Island or anywhere else. I want to keep...
Yeah, that's true. Maybe like the New York City feel you won't feel unless you're in the city. But like there's Brooklyn, there's Queens as well. I feel like a lot of like the New York vibes, actually more of them happen in Brooklyn than Manhattan. One message for Kelly is, instead of living in Central Park South or the Upper East Side, like a lot more of the stuff that happens is in the downtown areas, and some of them are much cheaper. So you definitely should look in that area if you're looking to get that like more New York feel. Most of the New York feel, it isn't on the Upper East Side. Another thing is, I've heard this from a lot of people who rent in New York City, is most of the units in the buildings, as of today, a lot of them are empty still. And the reason why that is because not every landlord is going to be using stuff like Street Easy or Zillow, which are like the two popular real estate apps in the area. So like a lot of them, they just do things themselves, and like they just have people hit them up. Because if you think about it, a lot of landlords are just like mom and pop shops, and some of them, they just have owned a building for like 30 years. Maybe they bought it in the 80s or something like that, and they just rent out the units. They don't use those complex systems that show up on like Street Easy and stuff like that. So if you can find some of those, that might be worth looking into as well.
I'm only going to be sexy and cute and 26 and fabulous and gorgeous once in my life.
That is true. But if you want to like make the most of that, then you got to pay for it, I guess. Like everyone wants to do that too.
And it doesn't make any sense to be throwing in the towel so soon to live in the suburbs. They are literally just discriminating. And even though it says, oh, we don't discriminate, they do. They do, 100%. They're like, in their heads, probably, why would we have someone who technically is a contractor when we can have someone who makes the same amount of money or even less, but it's guaranteed? But nothing in life is guaranteed. They can get fired. So yeah, that's the tea on getting an apartment when you're an influencer. I've never...
Dude, influencer tears, they're the best. So, who has a more stable job? A person working at Goldman Sachs or the person with a YouTube account with very fluctuating income? For law firms, they have exact salaries for each year you're in the firm. So it's like year 1, 200,000, year 2, 220,000, year 3, 240,000. Those aren't the exact numbers, but they have like an exact breakdown for that. Just look up big law like pay scale to find that number. So you know exactly how much a person's going to make throughout their career. And sure, you can get fired, but tell me, what's going to happen more often, statistically speaking, right? Like someone who works at a company that's like one of the biggest or most prestigious in the country, or someone who's making TikTok videos or YouTube videos. Like, obviously, the YouTube one's going to be more fluctuating, but I'm one step ahead of people. So I talked to some landlords again from before, and I was like, oh, would you want these people when you could get the other people? They said, oh, I actually do want some contractors in my building because, again, if something like a recession happens and people get wiped out, the creators, sometimes they're not affected by it. So they actually diversify their renter pool by having people of different backgrounds in the building. And that's very smart to do. So actually, like, a lot of landlords, they do want this type of people. But again, the majority is going to be like the people with regular salaries. So just keep that in mind. Like, landlords are not stupid.
My income changes every month. So they were fighting with me, being like, well, what if you don't fulfill these contracts? I said, well, I will. Why are you so negative? They said, well, something can happen. I said, technically, yes, but.
You know the way around this? Again, this is what the landlords were telling me. You just have a bigger deposit. That's really it.
A salaried worker actually is in a worse position because y'all got fired during COVID, you know? People got laid off.
But yeah, it's a little different because during COVID, the government gave those people money because they got laid off. And the reason why they got laid off is because the government closed down most of the businesses. So like, if the government is going to do that, they compensate people in some way. It's not going to be an exact one-to-one payoff, but like, it's better than nothing, right?
Watching the internet. So if anything, I have the most job security technically. Anyway.
People on YouTube aren't as loyal as you think. Again, like, I actually really like Kelly Stamps' videos. I've been watching her for like a couple years, and yeah, there's a reason things happen, you know, that's all I'm trying to say. All right, now that we went over that, let's look over what CNBC has to say. They always got rich takes.
June 2022, citywide median asking rent reached $3,500. That's about a 35% increase from 2021.
So you're comparing 2021 to 2022, like COVID happened, right? So of course the jumps are gonna seem much higher than they actually are.
The median asking rent is $4,100 in Manhattan, $3,200 in Brooklyn, and $2,600 in Queens. Half the renters in New York City spend more than 30% of their income on rent, and
Why did they exclude the Bronx?
third of renters spend more than 50%.
I'm going to filter for 2 bedrooms, which is what I'm living in right now, for $2,250, which is what I'm paying right now in my current neighborhood, and there's nothing, literally no matches.
Yeah, because your search criteria is ridiculous for what New York City is. That's why. Like, it doesn't take a genius to figure that out. But CNBC, they cater to the lowest common denominator, so like that's why they get away with this.
Some renters who got pandemic discounts are seeing their rent increase by at least 30%.
So you're saying you got a discount and then the regular price is gonna be higher? So I actually pulled up this chart here, and as you guys can see, they're talking about studios, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms, but an interesting thing is, look at 3 bedrooms. They've actually gone down. 4 bedrooms, same thing. So like, family places have been cheaper, and 1 bedroom studio and 2 bedrooms, they've gone higher, don't get me wrong. But the data they use, they're using like 2021 data compared to what it is today. That's very misleading because 1, all the inflation that's been happening. 2, everyone's moving back to the city. 3, there's the COVID discount rentals. So you're combining like so many aspects that cause these like very exaggerated jumps. If you compare it to like before COVID, it has increased, yeah. But compared to what inflation is, compared to how many people want to live in the city, I don't think it's that crazy. And of course, they'll never write the story about, oh, February 2016, it actually went down in 2020. They'll never tell you that. I wonder if this thing is actually inflation adjusted. It doesn't really say much on their site, so I'm assuming it's not.
New York City was empty at the time. People were away from the city.
She and her roommate found a 2-bedroom apartment in Manhattan's East Village for $2,250.
We actually got a great deal. I believe we got like a month or 2 off of the rent. So our rent was actually discounted. And also,
no one ever talks
our
about the
apartment
breaks the
has
landlord
in-unit
gives.
washer dryer, which you don't find a lot in New York City unless you're paying a premium.
Casey
No kidding, if you want washer dryer, like there's a reason why a lot of laundromats exist in New York. People don't realize that people actually use them because the people that look down on that, they like think they're above everyone else.
My original rent was $2,250. So they're saying if I want to renew the rent, it will be $4,395. So yeah.
Yeah, you live in a nice neighborhood. It's a big unit, so yeah, of course, they're gonna get market price for it because everyone wants to live there. You don't have to live there. The best way to counteract like things that happen in the markets, such as like real estate market, is just don't participate in it. That's one of the best ways to counteract it.
I looked at the number and I just started laughing. $3,500. Like, I had to keep saying it out loud to myself because it was such a ridiculous number that I was like, this cannot be possible. This must be a joke.
I mean, yeah, if you look at the data they show and how it's all like very specific data, yeah, the jumps are gonna look that big. Also, like, you had a discount before and now everyone's moving back. So it's not just going back to normal prices. It's gonna be moving to premium prices because more people want to go back into the city.
Of the city's nearly 3.6 million units, 2/3 are rentals. About 1 million are rent stabilized, meaning that rents can only be increased by a fixed amount each year. But even those lucky enough to be living in rent-stabilized units are seeing larger than usual rent increases. In June 2022, the New York City Rent Guidelines Board approved a 3.25% increase on one-year leases.
Wow, 3.25%? That's less than inflation, bro. That's like still a rent decrease. But I hate when people say like, oh, the people lucky enough to qualify for rent stable. Those people are like generally low income. Like, why are you calling them lucky? That seems very disingenuous. But CNBC is always like that. They like look down on people.
If I'm already checking off the boxes of what makes a great tenant, I have a full-time job, I make over 6 figures, I'm single,
6 figures isn't a lot in Manhattan.
quiet, and I can't even afford to live here, who is the housing market for?
So right
The people making $200,000, like the software developers, the lawyers, the bankers, yeah.
when we received the lease renewal in the mail, we just
Not the people making CNBC make it videos, that's for sure.
Like, what do I give up? Do I give up having access to be able to get food easily, or do I give up being able to walk to a doctor? Do I
How often are you walking to the doctors? Like, never mind.
give up my safety because some neighborhoods are safer than others?
Maybe we need to give more funding to the police. No. I'll cut that one out.
With the median asking rent in Manhattan around $4,000, that means the minimum income to qualify for an apartment at that price is $160,000.
Guess what the people living in Manhattan make?
The median household income in New York City is $67,000.
Okay. So you guys know what's happening here, right? These two statistics, they're not comparing apples and oranges. You think someone who's making $67,000 is trying to qualify for a $4,000 apartment? They're not. They're living in rent-stabilized buildings, they're living in rent-controlled buildings, they're living in boroughs that are further away from the city. They're not looking for those $4,000 spots. I can tell you that right now.
bedrooms and 1 bathroom and just
Look at this place. Like, yeah, it costs a lot, but it's got new everything. If you're just starting your career, people who start their careers, they make the lowest they will in their entire career. Am I wrong? I don't think I am. So you're asking for like really nice stuff when you're not making a lot. When you're starting your career, you should be living in like something very small, something not newly updated, not new appliances and stuff like that. Certainly not stainless steel. That's the way to do it, because as you make more money, as you get promoted, as you get older and older, I think this person, they just got out of college. This is my tip for you, since I am 29 years old. Start small. And then maybe as you make more money, you could expand bigger and bigger and bigger. And then maybe like 5 years into your career, you can afford a place like this, no problem.
It was $1,882 a month, and I was making $65K. I was very privileged enough to afford that rent requirement, but because it wasn't 40 times that, I needed a guarantor. That is something that was both embarrassing to deal with as a 29-year-old who, you know, with a master's degree, you know, I proved I can make it on my own.
If you have a master's degree, like, you guys know my opinion on master's degrees already. Like, they're probably the most useless pieces of paper in the entire world. More useless than an undergraduate degree. Also, if you have a master's degree and you're working in New York City, you should be making more than $60-some thousand per year. Or just don't live there.
Very classist to push certain people out.
I do agree that the guarantor thing is classist, because obviously the people who can have a guarantor are people in typically higher classes, right? It is classist, don't get me wrong there. But what do you want the landlord to do? They're just trying to make the most use out of the land. If you were the landlord, would you just accept anyone into your building when other options that have a higher chance to pay the rent exist? I don't think you would either, so just keep that in mind.
About a third of the inventory in the city come from people who are getting priced out of their pandemic deals.
You're getting priced out of your discounted deal? No way. It's not on discount anymore, guys.
But the thing that really threw us off was the broker's fee, which was $2,000.
I'm all for getting rid of brokers' fees. And there's nothing I hate more than brokers in general. Like, I don't think they do much, like, especially in real estate. They make so much money for the percentage they get. Granted, it's hard to get a real estate deal as an agent or a broker, but I do agree that they get paid too much. I don't think they add any value to society. Well, actually, I lied. They add some value to society, but not however much they're costing. I had a real estate agent once, and I told him, yeah, your job's useless. And he responded, oh, when you hurt your foot, do you go to a doctor? I'm like, yeah, I do, but a doctor's trained for 8 years of his life. You took a 2-week test.
Big chunk of it just went away. So I'm just going to have to change my lifestyle a little bit and, you know, save where I can. So
Why
it's
don't
just
you
little
tell
compromises I
CNBC
get
to
make.
pay you more money? I looked the people in this video up. Like, they're mainly just like people in media, and just tell your media company, they make a ton of money. Just tell them to pay you more, right? Or just don't work there. This video goes on for too long. Overall, like, are rent prices too high in New York? I do think so. Like, I wouldn't want it to be that high either. But there are a lot of fantastic cities to live in. You don't have to be in New York, especially in the day and age where most people are working from home. So if you need to be in the office, yeah, you get paid more the bigger city you work in. Like people in San Francisco, New York, LA, typically salaries are higher to compensate for the higher rent prices. But if you're able to work remotely, you don't need to be in a big city. There are many cities to live in. Like, it's just something that's foreign to me where like you have to live somewhere. Like, I mean, the way I grew up, my parents, they're forced out of their country and they're lucky enough to get citizenship in America after being forced out of their country pretty much. But yeah, moving, it's not fun to do. They had a forced move, but people in the US, they can do a voluntary move. So if something does benefit you, you can move to a more beneficial place and reap the benefits for it. You're not forced to do it, which I guess is like bad for them because if there's no incentive to do it other than like cheaper rent, better cost of living, then all right, I don't know what will make you move then because clearly your priorities are out of whack. But I hate people who just aren't on board with the just move argument. Like, my family's from New York. I got a decent job in DC. I couldn't get a job in New York. And what did I do? I didn't sit in New York and be unemployed. I went to DC and took the job there. I worked there, made enough money, and then I retired early. So keep in mind, my salary, while above average, it was not a ridiculous amount. So if you really put your mind to something, you can achieve it. There's nothing really stopping you. Like, yeah, the system sets up barriers and stuff. It'll be harder to do certain things based on whatever characteristics you have, but if you keep at it and you keep working hard, you keep making smart decisions or optimal decisions, eventually you will make it. So for some of these people, like New York City, it just isn't for them. I would not live in New York if I'm not a banker, lawyer, doctor, dentist, like one of those professions, because those professions, they pay $200K plus. And in New York, that's not even that much money in Manhattan if you're renting a $5,000 apartment, you know? And yeah, if you can't do that, just work somewhere else. It's really not that big of a deal. It's the greatest city in the world. And a lot of people, they go there right out of college. It's like, when you think of cars, is the first car you buy a Bugatti? I don't think so. You buy like a starter car first. You get like a Nissan Sentra. My first car, it was a used Kia Rio. It had like 100,000 miles on it, and it cost me $5,000. The people I knew who came out of college and went into their first job, some of them bought a Lexus, a new Lexus. And yeah, if I had to guess, I probably had more money saved up than them because I got the Kia Rio with 100,000 miles on it. Yeah, it's like, yeah, some people, you just can't reason with them. If you want to see more people you can't reason with, check out this Twitter combo that I cover over here.